Be me, Ryan, 29. I work ops at a B2B software company. We keep boring systems running for warehouses and shipping teams. Most days, nobody notices us. When something breaks, everyone suddenly does. Ops life is dashboards, on-call rotations, and fixing problems before someone writes an email with legal words. The office isn't cute, but it works. And works is basically the only religion we have. Coffee is the sacrament, poured from a machine that looks like it survived a small war and still wins daily. The cafeteria is the second sacrament, mostly because it keeps people from quitting on a random Tuesday. My crew runs loud, sharp, and tired, with humor that wouldn't survive a polite HR handbook. Jonah, 33, is senior on call, and permanently looks like he's mid-argument with sleep. Luis, 26, is newer, still thinks pulling an all-nighter makes him interesting. Malik, 35, is our rock, the guy who fixes scary things calmly and then goes back to being quiet. Our CEO, Grant, is the quiet, intense type who speaks rarely and makes words feel expensive. Grant doesn't visit ops much, but when he does, the air changes like pressure before a storm. Culture here is simple if you ask ops. Fix the thing, tell the truth, don't make it worse. Then HR hired a new people lead, and the vibe shifted the way it shifts before an outage. Her name is Vera, late 20s, clean sneakers, curated smile, eyes that scan like a checklist. First impression said professional, second impression said annoyed, third impression said dangerous. That danger wasn't violence, it was policy, and policy hurts without leaving bruises. She toured the place like the building itself had personally insulted her. Loud laughter made her flinch. Cursing made her blink slow. The coffee smell made her look disgusted. Two engineers argued about an outage timeline, and her smile tightened like a belt. She didn't say she hated us because she wasn't stupid, at least not out loud. Instead, she said the environment feels unsafe for some people, and everybody understood trouble was coming. Week 1 became listening sessions. Tiny snacks, big questions, soft tone, hard control. She asked how work makes us feel, as if servers crash, because they're emotionally misunderstood. People gave polite answers because nobody wants to be the first guy labeled the problem. She took notes like evidence, not feedback, and nodded like the verdict was already chosen. Then, one random Tuesday, the coffee machine vanished. A cheerful sign said under maintenance, which is corporate for gone and stop asking. Tea bags replaced it, plus something called focus water that tasted like wet cardboard. Someone joked it was a prank, then stopped joking when nobody laughed. An hour later, Vera sent a company-wide email with a smile baked into every line. She wrote that caffeine increases irritability and we're trying a 2-week reset. The message ended with, "Let's just try," like she was asking us to taste a new dip. Jonah read it twice and muttered, "2-week reset," like it belonged in a police report. Day 1 without coffee felt like walking through glue. By lunch, the cafeteria line looked like a zombie movie with employee badges. Vera stood near the tea station, glowing like she'd invented oxygen. She said, "Doesn't it feel calmer?" And Luis blinked like his brain was rebooting. The first week still had normal food, so we focused on surviving and complaining loudly. A small coffee maker appeared behind a plant, then disappeared by the next morning. Facilities didn't move fast like that unless HR had eyes everywhere. Week 2 brought tone reminders in meetings, the most humiliating phrase in the English language. Someone raised a voice about a failed deploy, and Vera asked if they'd had caffeine. She asked it gently, like she was diagnosing a disease, not blocking a conversation. Arguing back made you look guilty, so the room went quiet. 2 weeks ended and the coffee machine didn't return. Another email arrived claiming the results were promising and the office felt less aggressive. Sure, it felt less aggressive because half the staff looked sedated. Around then, the cafeteria started changing in small ways that got under the skin. Breakfast eggs disappeared, replaced with savory oats that tasted like sadness. Meat portions shrank and dried out, as if the kitchen resented anyone who chewed. Salt shakers vanished. Hot sauce got replaced with lemon wedges like we were in prison. Posters appeared about grounding foods and balanced energy, complete with glossy quinoa photos. People laughed at the posters for a few days, then stopped, because the posters never blinked. The office hum stayed, but lower, like a laptop forced into power-saving mode. Loud guys got quiet, sharp guys got slower, and the sarcasm started sounding tired. Vera loved that outcome, and her confidence grew like mold. Meeting rooms became her stage, and she filled silence with speeches about regulation and safety. Slides showed up everywhere, always with friendly colors and controlling words. Safe collaboration became her favorite phrase, said with the certainty of someone who never fixes anything. She began correcting people mid-sentence, not to help, but to remind the room who had power. Calling a bug stupid became harmful language, which was hilarious until it wasn't. Saying "crush this deadline" became violent metaphors, which made engineers stare at the ceiling. Every objection got reframed as emotional immaturity, which meant logic stopped mattering. Somewhere in the middle of month 1, response times slipped in tiny, deniable ways. Alerts got acknowledged late, not because nobody cared, but because brains felt foggy. Simple steps got missed, then caught, then repeated, like the team was running with low battery. Clients didn't know about coffee. They only knew the platform felt slower. Support escalations ticked upward. Managers started doing nervous smiles, and Vera called it an adjustment phase. Another email claimed we were unlearning stimulus dependence, like we were pets. Jonah said she talked about people like a project, then went quiet and stared at his screen. Month 2 turned the cafeteria from annoying to surreal. Burgers became plant-forward patties with the texture of damp sponge. Chicken became herb-roasted protein, sliced so thin you could see light through it. Ingredient lists looked like lab labels, while the food tasted like nothing at all. The coffee corner became a tea shrine with jars labeled calm and clarity. Asking cafeteria staff what happened got you a shrug and a whispered, "new policy." Asking who wrote the policy made them glance toward HR, like you'd asked who summoned the demon. Vera started bragging about fewer conflict reports, like conflict was a defect, not a warning light. She told a story in a meeting about high testosterone energy being disruptive. She laughed, the room didn't, and she pretended not to notice. Testosterone food showed up on her slides soon after, which still sounds fake when I repeat it. Red meat and caffeine were blamed for dominance behaviors, like she read one article and joined a cult. Petty enforcement started next, and that's when the mask slipped. Notes went to managers about teams being too loud near open workspaces. Extra chairs and ops got removed to prevent loitering, which is insane when you're on call. Our whiteboard got threatened because the jokes were harmful, and the jokes stopped, not the harm. Jonah's laugh got called intimidating in a private chat, and after that he barely laughed at all. It wasn't health, it was obedience, and her favorite reward was watching people self-censor. The rumor started about a spreadsheet of names, incidents, and quiet consequences for careers. No one could prove it, which made it powerful because fear doesn't require evidence. Security began wandering the cafeteria like they were hunting contraband. A contractor got asked about an energy drink can, and everyone noticed. Vera later wrote that stimulants impact shared safety, a sentence that should be illegal. Jonah got caught with a thermos that smelled like coffee and got invited to a conversation. He returned pale, not scared, just disgusted, like he'd been slimed by polite words. He said she asked why he needed caffeine to function, like it was a moral weakness. She called coffee chemical coping, and that phrase made me want to throw a chair. After that, Jonah stopped bringing thermoses and, more importantly, stopped disagreeing out loud. That's the moment I knew her goal wasn't calm. It was quiet. Quiet made her feel respected, and she was addicted to that feeling. Her little empire grew fast because ops people don't have time to fight HR paperwork. Some managers quietly liked it too because fewer loud debates meant fewer headaches. They didn't care that debates prevent disasters because disasters aren't on their calendars yet. Vera leaned into that and started acting like she owned the concept of professionalism. She walked through ops with a clipboard smile, correcting posture and voice like a school monitor. Someone joked she was building a monastery, and then nobody joked after she heard it. One afternoon, she launched quiet hours from 1 to 3, right when incidents love to happen. She framed it as deep focus, but her eyes lit up every time a room went silent. We tried to explain that deep focus in ops is called watching alerts, and she called us resistant. Luis tried to push back in a meeting and got hit with, "Your tone reads as aggressive." That phrase became a muzzle because you can't argue with how someone claims to feel. Vera started recruiting allies too, the office kind, not the war kind. She pulled in 2 new HR coordinators who laughed at her jokes and nodded at everything. They started well-being ambassador check-ins like we were middle schoolers with hall passes. They'd ask on-call people if they'd hydrated after a 2 a.m. incident, with faces full of pity. It looked caring from 10 feet away and controlling from 2 feet away. Meanwhile, the cafeteria kept sliding into blandness like a slow-motion car crash. Every week, something else vanished, and somehow it was always the thing people relied on. First eggs, then decent meat, then real bread, then the last good sauce. Someone taped a packet of salt to the wall like a missing person poster. Vera ordered it removed because it encouraged unhealthy coping behaviors. Malik started bringing lunch from home, then stopped because even home food needs energy to prep. He began eating cafeteria bowls with the expression of a man paying a fine. Jonah's hands started trembling during late-night debugging. Not dramatic, just noticeable. The team stopped joking about being tired and started sounding tired. By late month 2, the office had a weird stillness, like a waiting room before bad news. People stopped pushing back in meetings, not because plans got smarter, but because bodies got tired. The strongest staff weren't loud anymore, they were absent. Malik took sick days twice in 1 month, which used to be unthinkable. The guy who once fixed a database with a fever now sent the message saying he was too exhausted. Vera presented this as rest being respected, smiling like she'd invented sleep. Competence was leaking out through tiny cracks, and the cracks were spreading. One Friday, a new VP visited ops and looked confused by how quiet everyone was. He said it felt like a library, and Vera beamed like he gave her a medal. Grant didn't comment, but he watched the room like he was noticing the wrong kind of calm. Then the business started paying for it, and the payments showed up as charts and emails. Support escalations climbed. Small at first, then enough to stop being deniable. One client complained about slower updates on their dashboards, phrasing it politely, which is worse. Another client asked why incident notes were less detailed lately, which stabbed my pride. We were still writing notes, but our brains were taking shortcuts. Shortcuts work until they don't, and ops always learns that the hard way. Vera kept presenting success to leadership, and leadership kept pretending it sounded good. Her slides showed fewer conflicts, fewer heated meetings, fewer negative incidents. Nobody asked whether fewer heated meetings meant fewer problems or just fewer people speaking. During one all-hands, Vera said, "We're lowering the temperature in the room." Jonah whispered that she lowered the temperature by turning off the power. Right after that all-hands, I overheard Vera in the hallway talking to a director. She said ops had too much informal power, and it needed structure. She didn't say competence, she said power, and it clicked. This wasn't about nutrition or calm, it was about who gets to be important. Ops people are important during failures, and she hated that. She wanted importance that doesn't require being right, only being loud in meetings. Month 3 started with the chain of small incidents, each one survivable together, ominous. A queue spike got acknowledged late. 3 minutes, not death, but a warning. A rollback took too long because someone missed a step, then repeated the step, then questioned reality. We kept catching errors, but the catching looked slower, and slower creates costs. Vera responded by scheduling more communication trainings, because that's her hammer. Those trainings stole time from actual work, which made things worse, which proved her trainings needed. The loop fed itself like a parasite. Then Thursday night delivered the real mess, the one that turns charts into meetings. A partner AP. I went unstable, our queues backed up, and warehouse updates started lagging. The kind of incident where you need sharp brains, quick hands, and a little productive aggression. We joined the bridge call, and the movement felt heavy, like sprinting underwater. Jonah was there but delayed, thinking half a beat behind the room. Luis kept asking the same question twice, eyes unfocused like he was drowning in fatigue. Malik was out sick again, and the missing weight of his competence was obvious. We stabilized it, but it took longer than it should, and everybody knew it. The next morning, a major client emailed executives, politely furious, the worst kind of furious. Grant didn't explode, he went quiet. And quiet from him is a siren. A meeting got called with leads, and the room felt colder than the calendar. Simple questions came out, the kind that hurt because they're fair. Why are response times slipping? Why are seniors muted? Why does everyone look drained? Answers stayed vague because naming the problem felt like stepping on a landmine. Someone said burnout, someone said hiring, someone said seasonality, all the usual fog. Vera sat there nodding like she was the solution and not the smoke. She offered transition stress and growth pains, sounding proud of the words. Grant's eyes flicked to her, then away, like he was storing something. The meeting ended without drama, which is how you know drama is being scheduled. Later that day, a Slack message from Grant hit my screen, short and clean. Got time? No invite, no agenda, just a door opening, and my stomach sank. Walking to his office felt like crossing into a different company. Grant waved me in, shut the door, and skipped small talk entirely. He asked what changed in ops, not culture speak, just reality. Choosing my words carefully, I described symptoms, not villains. Calm but slower, quiet but dull, fewer arguments but more mistakes. He listened like he was measuring weight, then asked about the coffee policy. The coffee thing is real, right? A pause happened, then honesty, because the company was already paying for silence. Yeah, it's real. One slow nod came from him, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. He asked if food changed too, and I said yes, and the team looks physically depleted. No request to name Vera came, which made him scarier and smarter. He said he wanted context, not slides, and he wanted to see it. After that conversation, I went back to ops and didn't tell anyone because gossip turns into a weapon. Still, Jonah could read my face and asked if I'd been interviewed by God. I shrugged, which is basically confirmation in ops language. 2 nights later, Grant showed up near ops in a hoodie with the same quiet eyes. Vera arrived too, dressed like she was attending a networking event, not an incident. Her smile was ready, her posture was confident, and her boredom was leaking through. She talked a lot, filling the air with phrases about regulation, safety, and healthy boundaries. Grant nodded politely, but his attention stayed on screens and tired faces. Of course an incident hit because reality hates timing. Queues spiked, a dependency failed, and a cascade started, the kind that punishes slow thought. We moved in, triaged, split tasks, did the dance we've done 1,000 times. The dance felt sloppy tonight, not from incompetence, from fatigue. Vera tried to insert herself, asking checklist questions like she was auditing vibes. She asked if we could take a breath, while alerts screamed. She asked why voices sounded tense, like she expected production to whisper. She reminded people about tone, and Jonah's jaw tightened like he was chewing glass. The cascade grew, and she started snapping, because uselessness makes some people mean. She blamed emotional discipline, which made Louis stare at her like she was a ghost. Grant stayed quiet, letting her talk, and the silence around his restraint felt deliberate. Then her mask cracked further, and the stupidity came out in full color. She asked if the incident could be influenced by negative energy, and Jonah looked physically sick. We kept working, slower than usual, catching mistakes that shouldn't exist. Someone forgot a ping, someone repeated a step, someone stared too long at a log line. Grant saw everything, and his face didn't move, which was terrifying. Vera's control slipped, and she reached for the one thing she'd banned. "Can I get a coffee or something?" The room went still, not shocked by coffee, shocked by hypocrisy. No coffee existed on the floor because she made sure it didn't. Her eyes darted like someone would conjure a latte from a drawer. Nobody moved because nobody wanted to rescue the rule maker from her own rule. Grant looked at her, then looked at the tired engineers, then at the empty counter. He asked quietly if she was tired, and she admitted yes without thinking. He asked how the team is expected to do this weekly, and her mouth opened, then closed. No slide came, no speech came, only the ugly pause of a plan meeting physics. The incident hit a critical moment, and conversation ended because systems don't care about embarrassment. I took coordination, not heroic, just necessary, calling steps and keeping motion alive. Jonah locked in, Luis followed, and we brute-forced competence through exhaustion. Stabilization happened late, but it happened, and the room exhaled like it forgot breathing existed. Vera tried to talk again after the incident, like she could reclaim the room with words. Grant cut her off gently, the scariest kind of cut, and asked her to stay behind. Walking out felt like leaving a storm cellar after the sirens stop. The next morning arrived with no announcement, which is how you know something changed. The cafeteria served bacon and eggs like it was normal, and people stared like it was magic. The coffee machine was back, humming, ugly, perfect, like it had never left. No email explained it, no poster celebrated it, and nobody dared jinx it with cheers. Coffee got poured quietly at first, like we were afraid it might vanish again. Over the next week, little rules vanished too. Security stopped hovering, facilities stopped acting like thermoses were contraband, and HR went oddly silent. Vera still hosted meetings, but fewer people showed, and the rooms felt emptier. Her slides stopped appearing everywhere, and her speaky time shrank without anyone commenting. That was the punishment, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't give you a villain speech. Grant didn't humiliate her publicly, didn't fire her loudly, didn't hand her a dramatic exit. He simply stopped letting her decide things that touched operations. Vera kept the title but lost the steering wheel, and she didn't know what to do with her hands. She tried to regain control anyway because people like that can't sit with loss. She floated a new idea about incident debrief tone compliance, and it died in approvals. She pushed mandatory wellness journaling, and managers ignored it like spam. She asked for budget to expand her program, and finance didn't even respond quickly. That's when she learned a brutal lesson about power, which is that it evaporates without buy-in. The office got louder again, not toxic louder, alive louder. Jokes returned, arguments returned, and pushback returned, which saved us money in ways nobody celebrates. Malik came back looking better after real food and real rest, and the team felt solid again. Jonah laughed loudly one afternoon and nobody flinched, and it felt like a room unclenching. Vera started eating lunch alone more often, which was the most honest metric we'd seen. One day I saw her by the tea shelf she built, the jars still labeled calm and clarity. Dust sat on the shelf now, ignored, like a tiny museum of a failed takeover. Coffee lines stayed long, food smelled right, and people looked awake in their eyes again. Vera poured herself a cup of coffee anyway, jaw tight, like it tasted like defeat. She noticed me looking and snapped her gaze away fast, like eye contact could force a confession. Nothing dramatic happened after that, which made it feel real. No apology came, no redemption arc, no grand resignation, just a slow fade-in influence. The last time Grant walked through ops, he asked about tooling and incident prevention, not feelings. Vera tried to add a comment about tone, and Grant said, "Noted," without stopping. That single word landed like a closed door, and her smile flickered for half a second. Drinking burnt coffee never tasted so good because it tasted like the building exhaled. Watching her still employed but powerless felt stranger than a firing, and far more fitting. She didn't lose her job, she lost her audience, and that was worse for her kind of person.